Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and after capturing Atlanta, Sherman launched his march to the sea. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, or purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop. I truly appreciate all the support and help. Sherman left Henry Slocum's corps to guard Atlanta, while he took the rest of the army, nearly 60,000 men, to chase after Hood north of the city. What happened next has become Civil War folklore. Some of the events couldn't have happened in the sequence in which they did, and the correspondence has been mostly fabricated from what we understand, but it did give rise to a Civil War song. Sherman sent John M. Corse's division to reinforce the troops at Allatoona Pass when he heard that Hood was sending troops of his own to attack the garrison. When Sherman heard the sound of artillery and saw smoke rising in the direction of Allatoona Pass, he sent additional soldiers, but he worried that Corse hadn't got there in time. Sherman sent a message via signal flag to the troops at Allatoona, asking whether the reinforcements had arrived. Because of the distance from the site of battle, it was hard to make out the message. The message they received was CRSEHER. Sherman immediately realized that meant Corse here. At 2 p.m. on October 6th, Corse telegraphed that, "I am short a cheekbone and an ear, but I am able to whip all hell yet. Tell me where Sherman is." In response to this message, Sherman by signal flag stated, "Hold the fort, for I am coming." Later, when Sherman saw Corse, he stated, "Why, Corse, they came near missing you, didn't they?" After this alleged incident, the quote, "Hold the fort, for I am coming," became a popular song. Sherman didn't remember sending that message to Corse or making the comment about his wounds. In 1887, Sherman said, "It makes little difference, and we had better allow Moody and Sankey's hymn of 'Hold the fort, for I am coming' to stand uncontradicted." Although Hood and his troops were able to destroy 8 miles of track, Sherman put 10,000 soldiers to work with the repair crews and had the rail line up and running in 1 week. So far, Sherman was simply chasing Hood and using up his soldiers in the process. He then made the decision to stop chasing. Grant wanted him to destroy Hood before launching any raid, but Sherman disagreed. He believed that the war would continue indefinitely if it was fought in the traditional way. Plus, he could leave George Thomas behind to fight Hood while he made for the sea. Sherman wrote to Grant, "If we can march a well-appointed army right through this territory, it is a demonstration to the world, foreign and domestic, that we have a power which Davis cannot resist. This may not be war, but rather statesmanship. Nevertheless, it is overwhelming to my mind that there are thousands of people abroad and in the South who will reason thus: if the North can march an army right through the South, it is proof positive that the North can prevail in this contest. Mr. Lincoln's selection for a second term, which is assured, coupled with the conclusion thus reached, makes a complete logical whole. Even without a battle, the result operating upon the minds of sensible men would produce fruits more than compensating for the expense, trouble, and risk. I can make this march and make Georgia howl." Sherman destroyed his own railroad from Atlanta to Chattanooga, nullifying any reason for Hood to attack a supply line. To avoid leaving a garrison, Sherman would destroy anything of military significance in Atlanta. Tales of Sherman torching all of Atlanta has been exaggerated over the years. In truth, Hood had destroyed many buildings in the defense of Atlanta, and he also exploded 80 railroad cars filled with ammunition, which caused fires and damage to residential buildings. After Sherman's burning of his military supplies and some of his soldiers independently setting fires to some civilian homes, one soldier estimated that about 1/4 of the city had been destroyed, and that being the nicest part of the business district. Even a Confederate newspaper reported that many of the homes of the city were left standing, but that the business district, where military supplies were kept, was destroyed. Sherman had assembled a 62,000-man force made up of hardened veterans. This would be the army he would take into the Georgia countryside. He divided his army in half equally, with Oliver Otis Howard commanding the right or southern wing, and Henry Slocum commanded the left or northern wing. They carried with them about 20 days' rations and 3,000 beef cattle. Moving in 4 columns, each corps taking a different road, Sherman's army left Atlanta on November 15th. 50 men from each brigade were designated as foragers to scour the countryside and gather food. Sherman's orders said that they would forage liberally off the countryside, but were not allowed to enter dwellings, and only officers could order the destruction of property, and that only in areas of guerrilla activity. However, it didn't take long before soldiers broke Sherman's rules. Adding to the destruction was Union and Confederate deserters, who stayed on the fringes of the marching army, attempting to capitalize on the situation. Sherman's foragers, also called bummers, would proceed to houses. Many of them would be abandoned by its inhabitants when news came of the approaching army. With no Southerner to protest, the bummers took liberally from the farms. One Southern lady recalled, "Like demons they rush in. To my smokehouse, my dairy, pantry, kitchen, and cellar, breaking locks and whatever is in their way." Sherman and his officers rarely enforced the strict rules Sherman had established. However, Sherman did try to reprimand some soldiers. Seeing a man with vegetables hanging in bunches all over him, with a chicken in one hand and honey in the other, Sherman cursed him for violating the order. The soldier, not realizing who the general was, began cursing right back. When Sherman announced who he was, the soldier replied, "Oh hell, General, I am Abner F. Dean, chaplain of the 112th Massachusetts." After that, the chaplain began to quietly walk down the road, Sherman angry, but not stopping the man. The columns averaged 15 miles a day, burning anything associated with the Confederate war effort, like railroads or mills, but in general spared houses unless guerrilla attacks occurred in the area. Sherman believed that if the locals learned that an attack on the army would result in the destruction of their home, then they would stop their hostilities. The further Union soldiers got into Georgia, the more intense the destruction. Some Federals, hearing how Confederates used hounds to hunt down fugitive slaves and runaway Union prisoners, killed every dog they saw on the journey. One group of Union soldiers were shocked to go into a house and find two young girls abandoned by their parents. They attempted to find a neighbor who would take them in, but none would help, so they were eventually escorted to safety behind the lines. When landmines, or torpedoes as they were called, blew off an officer's leg, Sherman had Confederate prisoners sweep the roads for landmines. Although in general the Southern people were unharmed, the taking of their food and supplies could lead to starvation, sickness, and death. When Sherman and his army got to the outskirts of Savannah, the city was fortified. Laying siege threatened his army because he had no supply base. He had been living off the land. He had to figure out a way to capture the city quickly. To connect his army with the fleet that awaited outside of Savannah, he needed to capture Fort McAllister. He chose a division under William B. Hazen to attack the fort. After a quick dash upon the fortifications, in 15 minutes, Fort McAllister was subdued with the loss of 11 killed and 80 wounded on the Union side. When Sherman saw his men overtake it, he jumped up and down with excitement and with tears in his eyes. He got in a boat and floated down the river to the fleet where he was to have dinner with the victorious Hazen. Hazen invited the commander of Fort McAllister to dinner, Major George W. Anderson. When the men sat down to eat, Anderson was surprised to find that one of the waiters serving them was his own personal slave, who had only a few hours before been in the fort with him. Anderson asked Sherman's permission to address his now former slave. Sherman said of course, but then addressed the waiter, "But Bob, remember, you are now a free man." Anderson asked Bob if he had joined the Yankees. Bob responded, "Oh, I'm working for Mr. Hazen." Anderson then turned to Sherman and commented, "General, it looks to me as though the game is up." "Yes," Sherman replied, "the game is up. Slavery is gone, and the Southern Confederacy is a thing of the past." Still, the city was not captured. Only a connection was secured between Sherman's army and the Union fleet. The Southern force inside the city, under Lieutenant General William Hardee, evacuated the city, and by December 22nd, Sherman and his troops entered it, bringing an end to the march to the sea. One of Sherman's biographers wrote, "When the Union Army entered Savannah, it was on its best behavior. Soldiers stopped the city's lawless element from plundering stores and homes. They paid for goods they had previously taken in the countryside. Sherman's favorite regimental band serenaded the city. He held an impressive military review where he startled his own men by appearing in full dress uniform, and he even threw a large party for officers and selected locals. On the owner's invitation, he made his headquarters at the grand home of Charles Greene, the father of a Confederate soldier. He helped expedite a relief expedition from the north that brought shiploads of food for the hungry city. He governed Savannah as he had run Memphis, not Atlanta, successfully building up unionism in the area. Residents wondered if he could really be the brute rumor had warned them about.